What's up, witches? I'm Allie, the Bronx Witch, and welcome back to my channel, where you are the magic and where I talk about Wicca, the religion, witchcraft, the practice, and tarot. And I'm coming back with another flip through and review video, this time of the True Heart Intuitive Tarot by Rachel Thru. You probably know Rachel Thru from her television show Half and Half, or from some of the movies she's done like Half Baked, but she's probably best known for her role as Rochelle in the movie The Craft. And being a witch who's now in her 30s, and The Craft being something that came out in the late 90s, that movie, and in particular her character Rochelle, was really important to many of us budding witches, especially us budding witches of color, she being one of the first, and to this day one of the only representations of a young black female witch. And so that character means a lot to me, and it's so amazing to learn that she spent the rest of her career involved in tarot, learning how to read, reading for others, and now creating her own deck and corresponding guidebook. I originally pre-ordered this deck, I'll be honest, because I just wanted to show support to Rachel and to the project. But now that I've gotten a chance to get familiar with the cards and the guidebook, I am super impressed, and I'm really excited to share it with you, show you a little bit of the deck and of the guidebook, and give you my opinions and insights on it. You can get this book on Amazon and at local bookstores. I definitely recommend going the local bookstore route. I decided to purchase this from the Lit Bar, which is not only a Black-owned bookstore in the Bronx, New York, but it happens to be the only bookstore in the Bronx, New York. So I really wanted to support them. And I encourage you to do the same, so click the link in the description box below to order your copy of True Heart Intuitive Tarot from the Lit Bar in the Bronx. I definitely want to start by talking about the guidebook, because it's not only well made, but pretty unique when it comes to guidebooks, because in addition to being a book of information about each of the cards, it's also a collection of 22 memoirs that Rachel has written to correspond with each of the major arcana cards. It's a really thick book, it's got a lot of information, and the memoirs really add an extra level of depth and understanding to the images on the cards and to what those cards might mean when they show up in a reading for you. The guidebook is a really great quality. I love the weight and the glossiness of the paper and the layout of the book. The book begins with some information about how to get started with the tarot deck if you're new to tarot, information about cleansing, and some recommendations on different spreads that you can use for your readings. And then it launches into the major arcana cards with descriptions of the images, as well as what Rachel calls the low and high vibrations of each card. And then there's about a page-long description of the card's interpretations and what it might mean in a reading. And then we have the memoirs, which are Rachel's essays about her life, her career, stories about her family, and even moments of embarrassment and racism. And she's very vulnerable and shares a lot of personal stories that help each of the major arcana cards make a little bit more sense and resonate a little deeper. I would say my favorite part of the way she's approached the guidebook is by including the interpretations as low and high vibrations. I am someone who reads my cards in the reverse. Not all readers do that, and usually a guidebook sort of chooses sides. It either addresses the reversal or it doesn't. And what's cool about her book is by presenting the interpretations as low and high vibrations, you're able to use her interpretations whether you read your cards in the reverse or not. So overall, a very helpful guidebook, and also a very unique and powerful collection of personal memoirs. So definitely don't slack on the guidebook. It's definitely worth the read when you get it. So let's take a look at the cards themselves, and I have to say I really love these cards. Now, this is pretty personal to me, all the reasons why I really like these cards. They might not apply to you, but I'll just share with you why I really love them. So I have small hands, and large decks are really difficult for me. As you can see, this deck is not very thick at all. The last deck that I reviewed was the Modern Witch Tarot deck, and it's probably twice the thickness of this deck. The paper that Rachel has chosen is nice and thin, and I actually really like that. The cards themselves are sort of wide and short, also making it easy for me to hold them and shuffle. And as you can see, they're really soft and supple. They bend and shuffle really, really easily out of the box. I don't see that in cards enough, in my opinion. Cards are entirely too thick and too stiff for the sake of being, quote unquote quality paper. I really like that she's gone with this sort of playing card type of feeling. So I'm going to flip through the entire deck, but I'm just going to talk about some of the key features and the most important things about the deck. Starting off, of course, with the first card, we have the Fool card. And this card is the cover image for the book and the box itself. And this is an example of sort of a classic Rider-Waite-Smith approach to this card. You'll see that Rachel hasn't deviated very much from the traditional imagery. We have the Fool with their flower and their little satchel, the dog nipping at their feet, encouraging them to take a step off of a cliff that is in the air, presumably. How high, we don't know. So all of those features are still present here in the card. And I think that's very helpful. As she has said, for beginners, this is a tarot deck that is going to be very welcoming and easy to work with for beginners. So there is a lot of imagery that matches the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, which will help to make learning the cards and working with them a lot easier if you are in fact beginning. But I want to take a second just to say that I think with this card as an example, the Lover's card, Rachel's done a really good job of choosing imagery that goes a little bit deeper than just a replication of the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery. I think it's really interesting to look at which cards she chose to leave essentially the same and which cards she chose to deviate. Because the cards that she chose to deviate from significantly are really well done. There seems to be some specific and really well thought out decision making about when to deviate from the traditional imagery and why. One of the best examples of the departure from the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, in my opinion, is the Death card. I really love that she has decided to deviate in this regard and go with this sort of inner self inside the skeleton, skeleton inside the self, inception kind of thing. So we still have the image of the skeleton, the Grim Reaper, this idea of a harbinger of death, but the way that she's chosen to do it by putting the human person inside of the skeleton and then a skeleton inside of them really highlights the message in the card that's less about death itself and that's more about how the Death card represents a change, an end of a cycle in our lives, and the opportunity for a rebirth as a new and better person. And I think this imagery captures that meaning even better than the traditional imagery. And then we have the Star card. And I just wanted to take a moment to talk about this card because I think it is my favorite card in the deck. It doesn't deviate from the traditional imagery very much at all, but I just think it's a great example of how Rachel has included diversity in the deck in a way that doesn't feel forced. Rather than just slapping brown skin on previously white images, the individuals and the characters that are in the cards really represent a whole array of different hues and shades and sizes and appearances. And I definitely think that is much appreciated now more than ever as people of color come to tarot, begin to learn about it, and are looking for decks that represent them and represent what they look like in their life experiences. And another great example of this is the World card. So now we will take a look at the minor arcana, starting with the Suit of Wands. And for the minor arcana, I'm going to flip through them fairly quickly just to give you an idea of what each of the suits looks like and kind of the energy of the images, and to give you an idea of whether or not this is the type of deck that you would like to have in your collection. So starting off with the Suit of Wands, one of the most notable things about the cards is she's decided to kind of unify each of the cards of each suit with matching colors. And that's not terribly unique. I've seen that done before. But this is a particularly pleasing palette that she's gone with. She's chosen sort of matte cards. They have like a little bit of a shine to them, but for the most part they're matte, and the colors are very muted. They're not very bright or vibrant, and so that means that these images can be pretty colorful without seeming cheesy or amateurish. So the illustrations are fairly simple, but the decision to go with matte finish and muted colors makes them very classy and elegant looking, which I really like. Another cool feature is she has replaced the page and the knight with the prince and the princess. So the court cards are the prince, princess, queen, and king, and I kind of like that. I think prince and princess are more relatable for the average person nowadays. When we think prince and princess, we think kid sister, big brother. We think of a family dynamic that we probably all can understand a lot better than page and knight. The cup cards are united with this sort of blue aqua green coloring that pops up in all of the cards in the cup suit, relating it, of course, to the element of water. And another element of the images that we see in these cards is the eye motif, which I think is very, very interesting. It's a very powerful symbol, the eye, magically and otherwise, and you'll see it pop up several times throughout the deck, and it's very powerful, each of the images that chooses to incorporate the eye. And the Ten of Cups is another example of a card where she's chosen to stay kind of closer to the traditional Rider-Waite imagery. And I just think it's really interesting the times when she's chosen to stay close to the imagery and times where she's totally deviated and given us something different, because that only happens a handful of times throughout the whole deck, and it seems very powerful and intentional whenever she has done that. So I'm still peeling back the layers of each of those cards that's really different from the traditional, and kind of uncovering my interpretation of why she's strayed and what she's trying to convey in the different imagery. And the Two of Swords is an example of one of the cards that's pretty different, I would say. So is the Three of Swords, and again we get this similar idea of the sword being the swords piercing through the heart, but with a different angle. Some might even say perhaps a darker angle. The Five of Swords is a great example of the eye motif that I mentioned. And like I said, the cards that are very different from the Rider-Waite, like this one, they seem to be different in a really intentional way. Because for me, the Five of Swords is about conflict and argument and things like that. But it's also about how you see yourself in the argument and how other people see you as a result. So having this big glaring eye in the middle of the card, to me, seems to be touching on that aspect of the card's meaning. And I think that's really cool. And like I said, the images do have sort of a dark element to them. I think that's definitely darker than the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But I really have to commend Rachel for how good of a job she's done walking the line between the light and the dark. Some decks are really dark. Every card is really heavy. Lots of death imagery, lots of darkness imagery, and they can be a little intense. And then you have some decks that are all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, and they don't really give you the cold, hard, honest truth when you need them. This deck does a really good job of being in between. We have enough light and positivity and encouragement to feel uplifted and high vibrational while we read, but there is enough dark imagery to give us the cold, hard reading when we need it, and to help us to look deeper into ourselves and maybe face some not so pleasant truths. So I definitely commend her for striking a really perfect balance, in my opinion, in terms of the light and dark energies of the cards. And then finally, we have the Suit of Pentacles, or discs, in this deck. And rather than going with one unifying color for this deck, what unites the images in the discs is growth. So we have lots of trees, grass, flowers, butterflies, birds, and other things that are growing. And then once again, we see the eye motif pop up again on a 5 card, this time the 5 of discs. And once again, she has deviated significantly from the Rider-Waite-Smith image with this card, and it seems for good reason, because the 5 of discs for me is, yes, about poverty and not having much, but more about how you see yourself and how you see prosperity in general. And then, of course, the 9 of Pentacles is just fabulous. What a fabulous card. And another great example of diversity that doesn't seem forced. This isn't just the person in the 9 of Cups with brown skin, but a total reinvention of the character in the 9 of Cups. So important as more people of color come to tarot and will be looking for themselves in the representations of tarot and everything magical. So I'm really happy to see that Rachel put a priority on diversity in the deck. And finally, we have the court cards of the Pentacle suit, which are all unified by this beautiful maroon red, very earthy, very beautiful. An overall lovely deck that I enjoy flipping through and I'm enjoying working with. Alright, witches, thank you so much for tuning into this video and taking a look at the True Heart Intuitive Tarot deck and guidebook by Rachel Thru. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, give me a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, just leave them for me down below. And of course, subscribe. Click on the bell button so you're notified every time a new video comes out. You can follow me on Instagram @BronxWitch, and I will see you in the next video. Blessed be.